Welcome, everyone. So let me share my screen. Perfect. So today we are going to talk about something that's very dear to my heart, which is this idea of optimism. And, my name is Anu Gupta. I'm the founder of Being Well with Anu, but I'm also a scientist, educator, and a lawyer. And what I do is really train people in breaking bias so they can advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in their workplaces and in their communities. And the heart of our work at Be More with Anu is really supporting people in building this muscle of optimism so they can heal and also advance racial equity wherever they are. So today, as you're all joining us, it's going to be an interactive session. We had one similar like this last month, and we felt that it's really important for folks to be talking about these issues with one another. And before we get started, the one thing I want to do is, of course, first, Camille is our course coordinator who's also here. So if you have any logistical questions, feel free to message her. And secondly, I don't have all the answers, right? So we may not build the muscle of optimism by the end of our 45 minutes today, but my hope is that we can place that aspiration both for yourselves and for one another as we proceed after this event. So with that, I am going to begin our program with a short breathing exercise. This is basically how we begin all of our courses and all of our programs. So I'm going to invite you all to just come to a comfortable seated position wherever you are. You can place your feet on the ground below you. You can rest your hands on your lap or on your knees. And we'll be here for a few minutes, not too long. And if you're comfortable, you can bring your eyes to a gentle close or place your gaze at a stationary point in front of you. For the first few moments, just bringing your awareness to your breath. Notice your inhale. Notice your exhale. Really savoring this act of breathing that takes place every moment. If the mind is distracted, perhaps it's thinking, planning, anticipating, that's okay. Notice what's happening in the mind. And really acknowledge it. Thinking, planning, anticipating, whatever it is. And once you acknowledge that, see if you can bring your awareness back to your breath, to your body. Notice if there's any place in your body where you feel a little tense, a little contracted. Perhaps your jaw, your shoulders, your feet. And just extending that invitation of softening, of openness. And as you ease into your body at this moment, I'm going to ask you all to do a quick reflection with me. Why did you sign up for today's event? What brought you here today? And just noticing what arises in the mind, not needing to think or create an answer. Really notice what comes up. And acknowledging that. Today we'll be talking about building the muscle of optimism to advance racial equity and to heal. So as we move into that reflection, what does optimism mean to you? Once again, just noticing becoming aware of what arises in the mind. Maybe there are no words, maybe there's a feeling. Maybe there are colors, other visuals. Just observing what optimism means to you at this moment. And letting that go. Now, gently just returning your attention back to your body, to your breath. We'll be here for another few seconds, really savoring this moment to disconnect and be with the most important life there is, your own life. And then after your next exhale, you can bring your chin to your chest, stretching the back of your neck, and then slowly come back to the room. So we have a small group here, so would love for folks, if you're able to, turn on your cameras, that'd be great, so we can see one another and really be in community with one another. I know a few of you have done that already. But with that, I'd love to welcome you all, for those of you that have just joined. We begin all of our sessions with a short mindfulness exercise. And would love for you all to just use the chat function to actually introduce yourselves, perhaps your name and location, and what brought you here. Why did you sign up for this webinar today? Just as a way for us to get to know one another. So don't all type in. Kristen here in St. Paul. Oh, wonderful. Welcome. Susan in New York City, wanting to be with community and to be refreshed. Priya in San Francisco, seeking community. Beautiful. Elizabeth in Phoenix, interested in inner healing to hopefully share healing with community. Kiara in Atlanta. Wow, everyone's in a different location. This is so beautiful. Other folks, Kristen wants to learn how to see, feel, hope while doing this difficult work. Avani from Chicago, or Avani, looking to recharge and be able to get back to social justice work after getting exhausted by current events. Yes, welcome. Terrence in South Carolina, racial reconciliation and knowledge. Veronica in Texas, interested in healing for the community. Wow, this is, I think, the first time, and I'm also in New York City with Susan, and Camille is in Idaho. So I feel like we have a very, very national crowd today. It's so good to be with you all. And, today we're going to be speaking about, of course, racial equity and advancing it. But in order for us to have a really safe and a compassion-oriented container, I just ask all of us to abide by a few shared agreements as we kind of be with one another in community. The first is welcome, Andres and Luopu. We've just introduced ourselves to one another, so I'll give you an opportunity to do that once you've settled in. But as we move into our time together, I'd just love for everyone to use I statements when you speak. So I statements are just like things like, I think, I believe, in my opinion, in my experience, versus using the royal we or even the you. That's how we've been taught to be polite in the English language. But what we've learned in doing DEI work is, owning our experience really helps us build bridges across difference. So I hope we can agree to that. Second is really commitment to dialogue. And Brene Brown talks about dialogue having kind of two components. One is understanding, which includes benefit of the doubt. And the second is compassion. So really having that sense of compassion for yourself and others. Third is staying present So we began our session today with a short mindfulness practice because, something like bias and optimism can bring up so much in our experience. We can kind of run back to the past or to the future. But remember that you're in front of a screen, with all these people across the country. So really kind of taking that moment to come back to the present. The fourth one is connected to staying present, which is investigate discomfort. So this will inevitably arise, as some of you already shared in the chat, how exhausting this work could be. But really becoming scientists of our experience and noticing, what are the felt sense experiences of this moment? Body sensations, memories, thoughts, and the opportunity is to really bring awareness to them. That is kind of the work of breaking bias. And lastly, privacy and confidentiality. So really respecting that. My hope is everything you learned today leaves our container, but if any stories people share, you respect their confidentiality, particularly in our small groups. So can we agree to that before we move on? I hope. Awesome. So what I'd love for you all to do is a follow-up reflection. And for those of you that have just joined, Andres and Luapu, please do introduce yourselves, your name, your location, and what brought you here today in the chat. And for all of you also, I'd love for you to share in the chat, what is optimism to you? What is it? We reflected on it in our mindfulness exercise. And really starting with, to me, optimism is, or I believe, or I think, kind of practicing that I statements. What is optimism to you? If you could describe it in words. Feel free to share it in the chat too. Priya shared, to me, optimism is energy. Beautiful. Brooke shared, optimism to me is eternal hope and encouragement. Susan, buoyant feelings of hopefulness. V. Blair also shared that, hopefulness. Elizabeth is positive hope and energy. Beautiful. So keep these coming, and even if you don't want to share, please do keep that in mind. What is optimism? Because being able to just imagine that begins to move the inclination of our mind towards this felt sense experience. Kiara shared, I believe optimism is positive hope, reassurance, and love. Oh, I love that. Andres is from New York, and for him and them, optimism is a motivational state of mind. Yes. So welcome, Andres. And this is kind of where I want to start our kind of discussion today, which is a quote by Bryan Stevenson. And, if you don't know who he is, one of the leading civil rights activists in our country, advocates, attorney, and kind of works with people that have been condemned to a lifetime in prison, sometimes young children. And he shares that the only thing they needed was hope, not that pie in the sky stuff, not a preference for optimism over pessimism, but rather an orientation of the spirit, the kind of hope that creates a willingness to position oneself in a hopeless place and be a witness that allows one to believe in a better future, even in the face of abusive power. That kind of hope makes one strong. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about hope, about optimism, what a lot of you have shared already, that energy, that orientation of the spirit to imagine what's possible. And for me, this work that I do around breaking bias really began, I feel optimism is really the foundation of advancing the work of DEI. And for me, the journey around this was really tough, because I have been through many different educational institutions, one of which Priya was also part of with me. And the education system really trains us to be in our critical minds, right? it basically trains us to see why things are the way they are. And while our critical minds are really important, it kind of sometimes, for me at least, particularly going to law school, it was a little bit pessimistic. It was like, this is how things are. It was always doomsday scenarios, really breaking systems down altogether. Particularly when we study issues of racial equity and gender equity and how horrific the realities have been. But what really prompted optimism in me was actually being in community with people who I studied, right? So if I took an African American course, there are all these things I would learn, or learning about Indigenous history, but then actually being in community with those folks, working with them, and understanding that, wow, all these things that I've learned actually have real life implications. And the fact that people can go on despite what may have happened. That is kind of what instilled in me the moral imagination, that orientation of the spirit to move in that direction. And then the third is really giving myself, what that allowed me to do was really permission to imagine, how would I like things to be? And how would I feel differently if those things came true from now? So this is what I'd like to practice with you all now. So in a moment, we'll move into small groups, but perhaps, come to a comfortable seated position. We'll do another kind of reflection exercise. I feel like silence helps here, just for 1 minute. But just as you come into yourself, perhaps close your eyes, return to your breath. Can you imagine how you'd like things to be wherever there's pain? What would you like things to be like, particularly around issues of racial equity in our society? Perhaps it's criminal justice, perhaps it's education, housing, or something else, or all of it. Or perhaps it's something deeply personal. How would you like things to be? And then giving yourself permission to feel, if that came true, how would you feel? How would you feel differently from where you are now? What is that feeling like? Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's really your answer, your discovery. So thank you for sharing that. There's a person who just shared on in the chat. So this is actually what I'd like you to share with one another pretty soon. So we're going to break up into, hi Sandra, no worries, welcome. So we're going to break up into small groups. It's going to be groups of 2 to 3, depending on how many folks there are here. And what I'd like you to share with one another, again, observing the 5 agreements, using I, commitment to dialogue, staying present, investigating discomfort, and privacy and confidentiality. How would you like things to be different? Speaking from I, and how would you feel differently? And of course, you could introduce yourselves, your names, and your location, and hopefully you will turn your cameras on. So yeah, in a minute, you should receive an invitation to go into small groups, and we'll stay in there for about 6 minutes. Welcome back. We have another 27 seconds. Welcome back, everyone. So good to see you all. So let me share my screen for just a moment before we discuss together. So basically, I asked you all to, talk to one another about how you would feel, how you'd like things to be different from now, and then how would you feel differently, and of course, introduce one another. So kind of keeping these shared agreements in mind, I'd love to now just talk more about the second part of the question. How would you feel differently? So I'm going to stop sharing. You're also welcome to, um, share yourself on camera, but also share in the chat and or, you can unmute yourself and share what reflections came up for you. How would you feel differently? Yes, Kiara, please.
I would feel more open, to expressing myself to people that I don't know, having those conversations that you feel like you can only have with close friends, just being open to all of my thought processes and not feeling like I'm going to be judged the minute that I express myself the way that I feel,
I so love that you're able to share that deep insight, particularly when you said that you're not going to feel like you're being judged. Because that's something that's, for me at least, so relatable, because that is a really icky feeling, right?
Very.
Judged, right? Thank you for that, Kiara. Priya.
I shared that I would be able to take a deep exhale, just, and because my aspiration was about moving from the interpersonal to the structural and institutional, having those conversations, I would also get less, I would feel less on edge every time someone says, Priya Gupta, are you related to Anu Gupta? Like, and this happens a lot. I mean, not with you, maybe, but other Guptas. But that idea, I could feel just like, it's okay. Just let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love about that is that both you and Kiara, you have access to that feeling of what you would feel in this moment, even if it's not there. And like, for me, like that is kind of one of the intentions around this practice. And I see, Brooke, you want to share just 1 second. Because, our human brains have evolved in such a way that it gravitates towards negativity. It's almost like it's Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive experiences. And this is really part of our evolutionary inheritance. If you think about our ancestors, hunters and gatherers, they were constantly in survival mode. So this is why it requires practice for us to, build optimism, to build that sense of hopefulness. It's almost against the stream of our biology. So like keeping that in the forefront of your mind right now, for example, that, I'd like to feel that deep exhale. I'd like to feel open. So even if you're unable to be open or feel that deep exhale, that it's possible, particularly around, as Kiara shared, some friends and family members. So that's where you begin to build that safety. I love that. Brooke, I hope that's your name, but please feel free to correct me. Would you like to share? I think he's frozen. Well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
You said Brooke. I'm thinking about Terrence, my first name. I'm sorry, everyone.
Terrence, yes.
I said Brooke. I don't see a Brooke on here. Oh, I'm Brooke. To just piggyback a little bit off Kiara and what Priya said, I would feel more open to share, knowing that people would listen and hear, not only just hear, but listen to what I'm saying. And that's what we talked about in our chat, that we didn't feel that people really would, they hear, but they don't listen. And so feel more open to share things and express things, but sometimes you don't feel like other people are going to either listen and understand what you're saying. and not prepare a defense to what you're saying, or not to prepare a reply to what you're saying, but actually listen to what you're saying and listen to your experiences and listen to how you feel about things.
Yeah. And it's beautiful because you're sharing, what may actually happen in those situations. But I think bringing that to mindfulness, that, for me, for Terrence, for me, from what I'm hearing from you, is that I want to be heard. And what's beneath that? I want to be seen. I want people to actually acknowledge my existence, my experience, my feelings, right? And the flip side of what often happens in these conversations is those things are actually denied, right? Those feelings. That's why gaslighting is such a big challenge around DEI work. So yeah, no, I love that. And I think for me, again, building that muscle of optimism, but keeping in mind what you'd like to feel is so important. Hopefully building that within yourselves. Maybe one or two other folks, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you can always share in the chat as well. Yes.
I don't know if anyone's
Please
else. So this is Avni. I kind of rambled in my small group because I missed out on breathing with you guys. So I wasn't ready for the emotional impact of what I was sharing, which was that I wish that there was more compassion and empathy and less violence when it came to so many of our spaces where we're lacking in equity. And I think kind of echoing what Priya said, and she noticed it, and she said at the end of the conversation, it seems like there's this weight on you. I'm like, that's exactly what it is. I feel like I would just be able to breathe easier. And it just it almost feels like it is a literal weight of the world that's on you sometimes. You feel physically the impact of everything that you're seeing on the screen and the news, stories that you're hearing. And then just sometimes the hopelessness that you feel about whether or not you can actually make any kind of changes towards progress in the small ways that you're capable of when you see such, atrocities on such a large scale. So yeah, just that weight being lifted and being able to breathe would feel amazing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Avni, and if you're willing to stay with me here for a little, just a few moments longer, when you talk about, witnessing all of that and feeling that weight, right? Because it's not something that everyone can speak to. It's very particular to what you shared, that you experience. Can you describe what that feels like in your body?
It's just, I can feel it right now. It just, it's tightness in my chest. It's feeling like there's a lot inside that's welling up and wanting to release and not being able to feel it in my eyes through tears. So yeah, it's just it's literally that tightness and not being able to take deep breaths. That's why I regret not being able to do that at the beginning while I was running around, just taking deep breaths, because that's exactly what I'm lacking, is those big, long, fulfilling breaths. And it's more just you're getting along throughout the day and just trying to make it through as you deal with all this stuff coming up.
Yeah, well, my invitation for you is to take those deep breaths now, for sure, and I think one thing I, want to really encourage is, if you're able to notice because you have such an incredible sense of what that feels like already. You described it. It's tightness in your chest. It's, tears. It's feeling, I don't know if you use this word, but what I heard was feeling like you're not able to express yourself, which is almost like a feeling of being suffocated or being, right? So in those moments, if you're able to pause and really breathe, again, this is back to the nervous system. You'll see that it's so hard, but instead of running away from it, really feeling them, you'll see that they'll begin to pass. That's my hope. And then, of course, being in a community like this and being able to share so openly and vulnerably, hopefully will also support you in really building these muscles and these practices together. And I think with that, I want to actually share a little bit more before we move to more questions and reflections from you all, because I think it's a good, for me, what Avani shared is really how I came to the work, Avani. Like, I so feel what you're feeling, even though I don't know what your experience is. But that's how I started the work after law school as an activist myself. And I realized, doing this work that I was very aware of why things are the way they are. I'd studied it. I'd, gone to the root causes of these things, and I understood it. But when it comes to like breaking bias and advancing DEI, after doing a lot of work with, organizational psychology and group dynamics and peace and reconciliation studies, my team and I, we realized that we need to build like 10 different competencies, and awareness and comprehension are just 2 of them. So we need to build all of these. And what we've done at Be More is really build a 3-stage journey, which is learn, develop, propel. Learn is really about the left brain. So we know why things are the way they are. Develop is then building these practices. So like I can read a book about riding a bike, but I won't be able to ride a bike until I sit on a bike and start pedaling, right? So that's about really developing those skills. And propel is what happens after you've actually learned and developed these skills. So these skills are awareness and comprehension. That's like the foundation. But alongside those things, we need to learn how to practice optimism and curiosity. They are fundamental to moving on the Be More journey. Optimism is about feeling activated. So many of you described it as energy. Optimism is an energy. That's the activation, and hopeful about transforming bias. And then curiosity. And then from that, once we have the foundation of these 4, we build these other skills of skillful communication. Terrence was talking about this, right? Listening, being heard. So skillful communication is, of course, speaking, but also listening. And then moving into these 3, which I think, Avani, you were talking about, well-being, right? This is essential, particularly in this work. We don't stress this enough, but we need to take care of ourselves. And then empathy and compassion. This is like cultivation of positive emotions. So we could feel collective identity, which is this idea that we feel connected to and comfortable with humans across difference, across color, across gender. And as we do this, then we feel a sense of empowerment within ourselves to take action, to propel action. And then also social cohesion, which we've seen from working with hundreds and thousands of people, that people are unable to collaborate across difference. So activists are working with activists, doctors are working with doctors, and therapists are working with therapists, but we're unable to do that because we feel so divided. So that's, for me, like optimism is what lays the ground for this work. So I would love to just open it up to you all for any questions and other reflections you may have about the Be More journey, or about anything else that has come up for you so far. I can stop sharing so you can see one another in grid view. And feel free to ask me questions privately over chat, or message in chat as well. Susan, yes.
So as a white woman who started taking your classes and work a while ago, I've found that it's important for me to realize that just my presence showing up with white skin has unintended consequences and causes reaction in other people's bodies. And I so value like being in this space today and hearing how others, would feel. And so as my intention is not only to recognize the historic and terrible tragedies and inequities in our world, and the founding story of our country, and the ongoing day-to-day work that impacts people differently with this racialized work. I feel it's also so important for me to understand how to show up in ways that can allow other people to feel seen, heard, and relaxed. Like, what a beautiful thing to be in a room where people exhale with you, as Priya said, or Terrence, how you actually know I'm hearing and listening and with you, or Kiara, to feel like your heart's open, like you are with your best buds. I mean, nothing makes me leave a room as an extrovert, have had that kind of exchange, because I'm like, damn, yeah, we're in it. And it is that I thrive on open-hearted connection. And yeah, so much stuff weighs people down. Avani, when you talked about the weight of the world, I could see Sisyphus in myself, and I would just absorb the pain. It'd get stuck inside my body. I couldn't let it flow through me, and I didn't know how to keep it, from entering me. And that's my struggle. And I love the fact that we're together here talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I love that too, Susan. Thank you so much for those reflections and also that observation, And I think for me, this is an invitation, when you feel that you're in a space where just because of your being, you being white or having white skin, triggers a response in another person, of course you can observe that because you probably feel discomfort or lack of safety there, but also beginning to acknowledge that that's the work, that's their work, right? And not taking on their work on yourself, because basically these are the divisions, right? I understand that there may have been wounding. I don't know who this person is in one of your prior experiences, but there's probably wounding and healing that person needs. So holding that response from a place of depersonalization, that it's not you, but also with compassion that, oh my gosh, what happened to this human that they feel disconnected from me, not for any reason but the way I look, And that is what racism is, what a lot of people feel, right? Particularly in white dominant spaces, that's how people of color feel, but it could be the other way around as well, right? So I really love that, Susan. Thank you for that. Other reflections or questions?
I just wanted to apologize to my group because I could, when we broke out into the different rooms, I could hear them and see them. And for whatever reason, I had technical difficulties and was not able to participate the way I really wanted to. So I appreciate, everybody sharing. And Susan, thank you for summing up part of what I missed. I appreciate that. But I did hear Kiara making some amazing points that will make me think long beyond the end of this meeting. And I wanted to thank you for that.
I'm so glad, so glad. Thank you, Deborah. Anyone else? Or if not, let me share my screen once again. And you can also message me if you'd like me to read something.
Kiara had her hand up.
Oh yes, Kiara, my apologies, I missed it. Please
No,
do.
it's fine. Deborah, I'm sorry. At first your name said Debbie. So I was like, hey, Debbie. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Like right now, like you were saying, that what I was saying is it'll take you beyond all of this. So that makes me feel great. And I really appreciate that. And I think what we're talking about in where I'm at right now in the stage of my life, as far as social work, I think dealing with everything and being able to be optimistic when dealing with and working with different clients and different people from different orientations of life, all of this plays a big part.
Yeah.
Knowing how to heal, knowing how to make conversation, knowing how to be a great listener, like Terrence was saying, just being open-minded, being optimistic, that will take a person a long way. So I thank you all. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's great.
Yeah, and like the beauty is that you have this community, but also you can see that these are your deeper aspirations, and these are your deeper desires. So how do we practice that together? So, and someone is sharing in the chat. Let me just read that. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks. Someone, I don't know what the name of the person is, but I think actually they did say it earlier. But of course, thank you for coming. So appreciate it. Let me share a few more things before we close out today. Well, first is, this doesn't have to be the end, of course. A few things that we'd love for you to do is, we are really wanting to build a community around this framework, a really positive framework to really support each other in advancing this work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So please, if you don't already, follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. Unfortunately, these algorithms really dominate our lives. So if we really want to shift the way we talk about this work, we need to work with these algorithms. So we're at Be More with the New. Also, our next community event will be on November 10th. So go to our website under events and register for that. And we'll be talking about curiosity, the other really important competency we need at the foundation of breaking bias. And then, we have one last cohort left for 2021. It's a 5-week program called Breaking Racial Bias, where we move through the history and also move through the practices that help build those 10 competencies. So if you would like, please join us for those 5 weeks. I know Susan has taken that course, and I believe Trisha is in our course right now. If it's the same Trisha, but do check that out on our website. And if cost is a barrier, we do have a few scholarship spots left. So please feel free to apply for a scholarship. There's a form at the bottom of the page. And then one other thing we're going to do in November is actually a 4-day DEI challenge. So please do stay posted around that. So if you follow us on social or sign up for our newsletter, we're going to launch that. And that's really going to be, again, it's completely free. And the goal there is to really help people understand the importance of this work and how to do this work effectively. So with that, a lot has come up in this session, even though it was a short time. So I would just recommend a few best practices after our time together. Take 15 to 30 minutes for recovery. And that could mean, going for a walk or stretching or breathing, Avani, or whatever you need to feel embodied, right? So feel out of your head, really into your body. And then I'll also stick around, both Camila and I will stick around if you have any other questions or wanted to speak to us about something that we didn't cover. So in closing, what I'd like to share again with Brian Stevenson, what he says is, hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. And so hope is our requirement. It's our superpower. So if you really think about, it's a really deep quote. We live in a society where there's so much injustice, and then there's so much hopelessness simultaneously. So this is really the muscle all of us need to be building together and supporting one another in building, so we can imagine a new reality together. So with that, would love for you all to share one commitment you're making to yourself to build the muscle of optimism. You can share in the chat, or you can unmute yourself as our closing activity.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for sharing and bringing their truth to this forum. I feel very privileged to have been able to be a part of it today. Thank you. And I'm really grateful I found this group. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, and hope to see you again, Deborah. And then Avni shared going back to her yoga practice, beautiful. Susan, short meditations before meetings. Terrence, commitment to self-empowerment. And Sasavedo, I think that's the name, commitment to being more vigilant, especially when I feel as if hopelessness wants to overwhelm. Oh, that's powerful. Yes. May they all be so. So thank you all so much for coming. Hope to see some of you, many of you next month or in our courses. We'll also stick around if you have any questions or any other comments that you'd like to talk to us about. Trisha shared breathing more and focusing on what I can control in my small circle. Amen to that. Thank you all so much. I'll see you soon. And of course, we'll stick around if you have any other questions or concerns. Bye. Thank you.